Namaste everyone. Welcome to Learn with me. Today we will learn about clause with me. Clause, one of the most important topics in English grammar, because if we try to differentiate the sentences based on their structure, which we have seen in one of our classes, that without having a proper knowledge about clause, we cannot differentiate those sentences. And without having proper knowledge of clause, we cannot dissect the sentences as per their structure. So, let us today have a complete knowledge about clause, its definition, as well as different types. So without further delay, let us begin. So first let us know the definition of clause. As you can see, a clause is a group of words having a subject and a predicate of its own, but forming the part of a bigger sentence. So two important things we have to remember if we try to remember the definition of clause. What are they? The first thing that we must remember, it is a group of words having a subject and a predicate. Now from this particular, we are being reminded of the definition of a sentence, because a sentence is also a group of words having a subject and a predicate. So some may say that definitely a clause is a sentence, so there is no difference between a clause and a sentence. But yes, there is a difference, and that difference is very much prominent, and which is indicated by the latter part. If we try to look at this, but forming the part of a bigger sentence. So a clause is always the part of a sentence, it's not the whole sentence. Like a sentence, a clause also has a subject and a predicate, but the difference between a sentence and a clause is that a clause is always a part of a bigger sentence. Now let us have an example and let us try to know what the actual matter is. For example, if we try to write like this, I know where he lives. I know where he lives. So if you look at this sentence very carefully, this sentence clearly has two parts. One is I know, another one is where he lives. So that means these two parts are forming the bigger sentence. That means these two parts are actually the part of the bigger sentence. Now let us see whether these two parts have subject and predicate of their own or not. If both the parts have their subject and predicate, then definitely they are two clauses, because they are the part of the bigger sentence. So I know, here it is pretty much clear that we have the subject as well as the predicate. Again, where he lives, we also have the subject and the predicate. So both the parts have subject and predicate of their own, but both the parts are forming the bigger sentence. That means this part and this part, they are the part of the bigger sentence. And that's why they are clause, not sentence. So once again, if we try to see the definition, that a clause is a group of words having a subject and a predicate of its own, but forming the part of a bigger sentence. In that sense, we can also say that a clause is a sentence, but it is a part of a bigger sentence. So this is what the definition of clause is. Now let us have a look at the different types of clauses. We have three types of clauses initially: principal clause, subordinate clause, and coordinate clause. So why? Because when we say that a clause is the part of a sentence, that means one part may be different from the other part of the bigger sentence, and that's why there are types of clauses. So first one is principal clause. Now let us have a look at this principal clause. A principal clause, if we try to define, it is also known as independent clause. Independent clause. So what is independent clause and what is principal clause? From this very particular name independent, we can pretty clearly say that a clause that is not dependent on other clause. That means a clause that can express its meaning by itself. That means a clause that doesn't depend on another clause to complete its meaning. That means a clause that is self-dependent. So, principal clause, this is a clause that can express its own meaning independently. That means to express its meaning, this clause is not dependent on another clause. So let us have an example and let us see how this clause can be called an independent clause or a principal clause. So the first type of clause, that is principal clause or independent clause, we would see now with the help of an example. I know where he lives. The same example we are taking for the better understanding of the matter. So, I know where he is. Earlier we have seen these are the two parts. I know one part, where he lives, the other part. Now, let us try to know which part can express its own meaning independently. That means, which part of this bigger sentence is not dependent on the other part to express its meaning. So, I know. It has a subject and a predicate. I know can definitely express its meaning independently. I know this, I know that, I know many things. So I know it certainly expresses its own meaning independently. That is why this part is the principal clause. Now if this part is expressing its own meaning, so whether this part is not expressing, so let us see. Now if we read this part, where he lives, you see, as if the meaning is not coming properly, where he lives, as if this meaning is incomplete. But if we go back to this part, and if we read the whole sentence, I know where he lives. So, this meaning of the second part is also getting cleared. So that means this part is depending on the another part, but this part is not depending on the another part. So that's why this particular part of the bigger sentence is known as the principal clause or the independent clause, because this part is not depending on the another part to express its meaning. Hopefully this is clear. After principal clause, we have the subordinate clause. Now when we talk about subordinate, when we say subordinate, that means this is working under something or somebody. This is working as subordinate. This is not working as principal, or this is, you can also say, a dependent clause. A dependent clause. That means this clause is dependent on another clause to express its meaning. Unlike the principal clause, where we saw that it can express its own meaning pretty clearly, but as per the subordinate clause or the dependent clause, this clause cannot express its meaning clearly. That means it depends on another clause to express its meaning. That means to express the meaning, it has to depend on another clause. That is why this is dependent clause. And as it is dependent clause, this is subordinate clause, because this is working as subordinate, as it cannot express its own meaning clearly. So let us take an example. We are going to take the same example so that the idea gets cleared. So the example that we had, it is, I know where he lives. I know where he lives. The same example that we had. So the two parts clearly, one is I know, another one is where he lives. And we have seen this particular part, I know, it can express its meaning pretty clearly. Now as per the second part, let us come. Whether this part can also express its meaning or not, let us see. Now where he lives, if you simply say this part, where he lives, in your mind it is coming that as if the idea is not clear, as if the meaning is not completed. Where he lives, where he lives. If you want to know where he lives, if you want to know the purpose, if you want to complete the sense, if you want to complete the meaning, then you have to go back to this. Now the meaning is pretty clear. I know where he lives. So in order to complete the meaning, this part has to depend on this part. That is why this is a dependent clause. This is a dependent clause. Why? Because as this is depending on this to complete its meaning. So a dependent clause or subordinate clause is that clause that depends on another clause to express its meaning clearly. After the subordinate clause, in the third category and the last category of the clauses, we have the coordinate clause. The third one we have with us is the coordinate clause. Now coordinate. When we say coordinate, that means working together. Yes or no? That means coordinate clause is a clause where maybe two different clauses, ideas, sentences are working together to complete the meaning. So coordinate clause are clauses of same weightage. They are clauses of same rank or importance. They are clauses of same rank or importance, but joined by a coordinating conjunction. That means when two clauses of same rank, two clauses of same importance, two clauses of a same weightage are joined by a coordinating conjunction, that clause becomes a coordinating clause or a coordinate clause. That means one clause is coordinating with the another clause. That means one part of the sentence, one part of the bigger sentence is coordinating with another part of that bigger sentence, and both are of same weightage, both the parts have same importance, both the parts are of same rank. So let us have an example of this. If we try to write like this, he is poor, but he is honest. Now let us see. He is poor. So we can see here we have a principal clause or independent clause, because it can express its own meaning. He is poor. This one is the subject and this one is the predicate. But he is honest. Again, this is the subject and this is the predicate, is honest, and this is also a principal clause. So here in the bigger sentence we have two principal clauses, and both the principal clauses are joined by a coordinating conjunction but. So, and both are of same weightage, both are of same rank. That means both are talking about this person, this particular person, that he is poor, he is honest. So they are the two qualities and the two states, two condition of the person about whom we are talking. So he is poor, one principal clause, he is honest, another principal clause of same weightage, of same importance, but both the principal clauses are joined by a particular coordinating conjunction but, and hence this clause is a coordinate clause. So coordinate clause is a clause where two clauses, it may be one principal clause and another subordinate clause, maybe two principal clauses, but that should be of same rank, same weightage. That is the condition. So coordinate clause is that clause where two clauses are coordinating with each other. That means two clauses are joined by coordinating conjunction, and this is what a coordinate clause. So we have clearly seen that a clause is definitely the part of a bigger sentence, because a sentence is also a group of words, a clause is also a group of words. A sentence and a clause, initially it may seem that there is no difference, but a difference, and the most important thing is that a clause is obviously and always a part of a bigger sentence. A clause, you can say a sentence as it has its subject and its predicate. So this is also a sentence. A clause is also a sentence. A clause is a group of words. But a clause is always a part of a bigger sentence. So there is the difference between a clause and a sentence. And a clause can be divided into three types: principal clause or independent clause, the clause that can express its own meaning independently; subordinate clause or the dependent clause, the clause that depends on another clause to express its meaning, and the last one, coordinate clause, a clause where two clauses of same rank are joined by coordinating conjunction. So hopefully the idea of clause and its different types are pretty clear. Once we go through the definition and we go through all the three types along with the examples, it will be pretty clear to know more about clauses. Now one interesting thing is that when we are talking about subject and predicate, some of you may not have a clear idea of what subject and predicate is. So for that you can go through another video of mine where I have dealt in detail about subject and predicate. As per the three types of clauses, especially the subordinate clause, this clause has many other types. So we'll discuss about subordinate clause in our next class. So hopefully it is understood clause and its various types along with the examples, the difference between a sentence and a clause, and all the three clauses, their types along with the examples. So hopefully it's clear. That's all for today. Thank you.